Good. All right. So good evening, everyone. My name is Marguerite Anglin, and I'm the Public Art Director for the City of Philadelphia. Welcome to the Power of Public Art, Connecting People, Place, and Story virtual panel discussion. I'm excited and honored to have our panel of artists joining me, Ife Nii Owoo, Talia Greene, Marsha Reid, and Wesley Wofford. Tonight, we will be discussing the ways that public art can effectively tell our histories and impact positive change in the communities where they are located. I'm really looking forward to tonight's discussion with our artists who I know are going to enlighten and inspire us. This program is brought to you by the City of Philadelphia Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy, the stewards of Philadelphia's public art collection of over 1,000 works of public art, located in every neighborhood of the city. This extraordinary collection reflects Philadelphia's rich history and many diverse communities. Our panelists tonight have been responsible for some of the most engaging and impactful pieces of temporary and permanent public artworks in the city. This program is part of the City of Philadelphia's celebration of the legacy of Harriet Tubman and coincides with the installation of the Harriet Tubman, The Journey to Freedom sculpture by Wesley Wofford, one of our panelists tonight. This event is one of more than 40 virtual and in-person programs that are happening throughout Philadelphia. Programming continues through March 31st, and there is still plenty for you to see and do. So please visit creativephl.org for a full calendar of events. And so with that, I'm gonna get out of the way here, and I'd like each of the panelists to briefly introduce yourselves and tell us what you do in the public art sphere. And I would like to just apologize that unfortunately one of our panelists, Hank Willis Thomas, is not able to join us tonight. And so I'd like to start with Ife Nii Owoo, if you could give an introduction.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to thank the Office of Arts and Culture and Creative Economy and the City of Philadelphia for inviting me for this conversation and the celebration of Harriet Tubman's legacy. My name is Ife Nii Owoo, and I'm a visual artist, a graphic artist, a public artist, educator, and cultural worker. As an artist, I use texture, color, photographs, graphic marks, writing scripts, historical icons, poetry, symbols, and patterns to create visual stories of family, healing, and spiritual growth. The power of myth and collective memory and its relevance in shaping history in our lives gives me and my work great joy. And I love working outside of traditional canvases, creating collage, fans, paintings, assemblages, and site-specific public art. Here's a quote from John Berger, Ways of Seeing. The past is never waiting to be discovered, to be recognized for exactly what it is. History always constitutes the relationship between the present and the past. And when we are prevented from seeing it, we are being deprived of history that belongs to us. And it's this continued erasure of Black and Brown history and our existence that drives my work. Whether working alone in the studio or collaborating with others, I deconstruct and construct forms, icons, and symbols taken from the past while creating the present to ensure our present and contemporary personal and public landscapes are not erased. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ife. I'd like to invite Marsha Reid, to introduce yourself.
Hello, good evening. I am Marsha Reid. I am the Executive Director of Kindred Arts, which is a cultural equity initiative, and I am also the producer and programmer for Monumental Tour, which is a touring large sculptural exhibition that examines aspects of African American history. I, as I said, I'm an interdisciplinary arts producer. I'm based in Harlem, and my nonprofit works address equity, public space, community, communitas. My historical background in that has been artistic planning for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Black Girls Rock Awards and Tour, Lincoln Center Out of Doors, and working in New York City Parks and various public programming aspects, all under the umbrella of Kindred Arts. What we do at Kindred is explore the significance of public sites and their functions in enriching communities, and we produce culturally specific public programs that support tradition and history and ritual, utilizing space as an incubator for action and creation, and the work is a resistance to contemporary public policy and power strategies that kind of determine who can be seen in public spaces and what is represented. And it's my honor to be here with this wonderful range of participants.
Thank you, Marsha. And please accept my apologies. Hank, I think there was a little mix up on my end. Thank you and welcome to the panel. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. It's a problem on my side. I can only join by phone. My computer has not been working, so I apologize.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. My name is Hank Willis Thomas. I am a conceptual artist who has dedicated my work to the pursuit of truth, love, and the value and importance of every life. I believe all lives matter. And one of the lies is that many of the lies have been told about people of African descent on this planet. And my work is very much an attempt to correct the record in various ways, while also inviting people to commune around our collective necessity to rely on each other. And so I was very fortunate to have a sculpture, All Powered, All People, of a most recently 28-foot Afropic that was placed at Eaton's Oval most recently, but also in North Philadelphia, inspired by public art that I saw as a child of Klaus Oldenburg. That's still up near City Hall, a clothespin in an airplane. So I'm really glad to be here for this event and on this day. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Hank. I'd like to invite Talia to introduce yourself and tell us what you do in the public arts sphere.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Thanks, Marguerite and the city for inviting me and for putting together this wonderful panel. I'm honored to be here. And I am a fine artist and installation artist. I do a lot of site-specific work that involves thinking about how we can sort of contextualize contemporary issues through history. And the work I would say that's most relevant to this panel, and also the piece I'm the most proud of, is a permanent piece that was a Present for Art project for the city of Philadelphia at the Philadelphia Archives. And it's called Charting a Path to Resistance. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that project later on. So I'll just say thank you again and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Talia. And last but not least, Wesley Wofford.
Hello, everyone. First off, thank you for having me on this panel. It's a room full of amazing people, and I'm honored to be in the conversation. And also thank you for hosting the Journey to Freedom in Philadelphia. It is the largest city to date for that traveling sculpture, and a very important, relevant city for Harriet Tubman and specifically that sculpture. So I'm honored that it's there. Essentially, I'm a figurative sculptor. I push clay into the shapes of people and animals, things with muscles and bones. And I mean, I've been a professional sculptor my entire life. I originally started out in the film industry, more out of necessity than anything else. And that led me to wanting to be involved in more expressive, permanent pieces. And frankly, this Journey to Freedom Commission that was about 4.5 years ago kind of transformed my professional focus and life again, to really want to be involved in the public sphere and to help bring some equity to our public spaces in regards to cultural representation and the voices that haven't had a voice historically, specifically with figurative public art. That's me, I guess.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. So let's just jump right into this discussion. We're going to be talking about the power of public art. There's so many forms and expressions of public art, and people have different views on what public art is and what it should be. So to all my panelists here, if you had to define public art in one sentence, what would it be? And I'll call on Wesley, since you were the last one, if you could just give us a sentence.
Yeah, I think that's really difficult, one sentence. But thinking about it, so I'm going to speak specifically about figurative public art, because that's my wheelhouse and my language. And essentially, I think that it needs to authentically celebrate human achievements and ideals that uplift and inspire all who see it.
Oh, that's great. Love that. Marsha. Julie.
So again, I echo Wesley's sentiment. It's a hard question, and so I can only answer it from my perspective, which is as a presenter and how I think about what art should be, or how it should manifest itself. And for me, art should be a catalyst for civic dialogue.
I love it.
Completely agree.
Very true. Very true. Very true. And Talia, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think I was thinking something very similar. I was thinking about it being a space for public and collective reflection.
That's great. And Hank, do you care to add?
Public art should inspire us to connect with our community, past, present, and future.
These are great. These are great. Ife, take us home on that one. What would you say? And you look like you're muted, so just in case you didn't see that.
For me, public art is created to remember, to bear witness, to honor the memory of a people. And this is my experience in a collective process.
That's great. I think it's really interesting how everyone's definitions were, different, but all, talked about expressing collective voices, or it's not just in the public sphere. It's actually reflecting the people. So I think that was really, really great. Thank you, everyone. We talked a little bit about the Harriet Tubman sculpture, the Harriet Tubman Journey to Freedom statue. And it represents the first individual temporary statue of a historical African-American woman in Philadelphia. I'd like to get everyone's take on, why is it important to memorialize a person like Harriet Tubman here in Philadelphia? And Ife, since you were the last, I'm going to just kind of go
Okay.
backwards.
Well, I think that Harriet Tubman, she sought her freedom here in Philadelphia, and she began working with William Still and the other members and heroes of the Underground Railroad. So one, Philadelphia was a vibrant, at that time, community for free African Americans. And I think that, her courage, her passion, her bravery, should be remembered for, her struggle. And I think that also in Philadelphia, we don't have that many memorials. It's just a town that is of history. We don't have many memorials at all. I think there's only 3 for women, historical women. Only one memorial for an African-American woman, which is not historical. It's at the Smith Playground, but it was envisioned by the sculptor to really give recognition to that. So I think it would be great, and I think the community would respond to it well.
That's great. Yeah, the sculpture you're referencing is MVP. It's a sculpture of an African-American girl in Smith Playground.
And we only have 3 historical sculptures of women in Philadelphia out of the hundreds of historical sculptures that we have. So I think she would be a great addition to the to our history here.
Yeah, those are great points, Ife. I'm curious, Marsha, what are your thoughts on why is it important to memorialize a person like Harriet in Philadelphia?
So I would frame what we collectively do as making room for narratives other than the dominant one. Our mere existence collectively right now challenges the questionable historical legacies that are cemented into the public sphere and that we just accept as the norm. And it's important because there are systems of power that grant privileges and access unequally. And we're all entitled to full, vibrant, creative lives and representation and affirmation in our communities. And so the work that Wesley is doing and that the city of Philadelphia indeed is doing to reimagine the environments that they inherit ultimately, to express contemporaneous values of their city. Is extremely important, and that's all of our work. And I think that as municipalities and cultural institutions reimagine community engagement in this post-COVID, uprising society, there exists an opportunity to fundamentally rethink how we program outdoor public spaces to reflect and honor human identities and all our experiences. So it's extremely important what's happening here with Wesley and the city of Philadelphia, and indeed monumental.
Yeah, I like that you kind of reference kind of some of the character of Philadelphia and maybe even, obviously the character that Harriet had, just her grit and determination. I think that really aligns in Philadelphia. Talia, I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to say, of course. And I think a lot of my thoughts were very much in line with what Marsha already said in terms of sort of thinking about rethinking, who is visible, what stories are visible, and, creating a space for not just one kind of, well, let's say white male identity to be what history is about, and so I guess the other thought I have is, I guess the role that art plays in not just sort of reflecting history, but also writing history. So when we think about these kinds of statues and how long they exist in public spaces, they're not just reflecting history in the present, but they're putting down history that then exists decades to come. And so even though Harriet Tubman is a person from centuries ago, I think there's an opportunity to now which is happening in a lot of spaces, 1619 Project, and a lot of different people are, saying it's time to rewrite history, I guess, to propose a different view of history that's more inclusive. And I guess my point is that art can play a really important role in sort of cementing those stories in a way that maybe history books don't.
Yeah, and making it even more accessible.
Yeah,
That's-
exactly. Yeah.
Hank, would you let us know your thoughts?
Harriet Tubman is one of the most famous people in American history.
That's a great
And that's my
reason.
thought.
Why not, right? She's
Well, it's just that
her importance alone. That's a great answer. Great answer. Thank you, Hank. And Wesley, we'll end with you. This is.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that everyone said is important and spot on. I think that, I mean, we're in the 200th year of her birth. To me, she's as synonymous with Philadelphia as the Liberty Bell and the Constitution and Benjamin Franklin and all of these other things that have been used to kind of project the city of Philadelphia. I think that the city's collection, specifically of figurative bronzes, is one of the largest in the country. And I think the fact that she was such a presence in this town and Philadelphia was so integral to her story specifically, and there isn't a statue of her in the collection. I think that speaks volumes about what is wrong in America regarding cultural representation in our public spaces. Like I can't believe that there's not a statue of her in that city. I can't believe there's not a statue of her in Cambridge, the city of her birth. I think that it, like, she's an amazing human being, an amazing American, the ultimate quintessential American hero. Like, she embodies everything that all of us should strive to be. I mean, it's just unbelievable that it doesn't exist.
You know, the response to the statue, the Journey to Freedom, has been positively overwhelming. You know, just how deeply it has resonated with people in Philadelphia and beyond. You know, Wesley, tell us, how did you arrive at the imagery for the statue, and how do you feel it embodies Harriet's legacy?
So it was a commission. It was a request from a client that I had worked with before. And so really it was, you know, hey, we want a sculpture about with a freedom focus. We want it to be Harriet Tubman. Maybe it's Harriet Tubman with a child. And those were pretty much the notes I was giving. That led to like some pretty intensive historical research. I think that authenticity in our, I think authenticity in a statue, I mean, these statues last like 15,000 years. So it's very important that they're correct, that they're authentic, that they're not hurting others. I mean, if you reference like, you know, someone kind of alluded to like Confederate statues and kind of the reckoning that's happening in America. I think it's an incredible responsibility of what these objects are that have such a permanence. So for that, it was a lot of reading and a lot of learning, because you don't want to build a stereotype. You don't want to assume that you know the story. I mean, specifically for me, like, I'm a white male asked to produce something like this. So I'm not talking about me. I'm not talking about my story. So I really have to do a deep dive on who she was, try to find as many, first person descriptions of her, biographies, like as much historical reference as possible, and then sort of boil that down to essentials of what I would like to express. I mean, she had such a depth to her that I think you could probably do 10 statues of her and not cross the same ideals, because she just had so much going on over the course of her life. So for this one specifically, it was very much about the journey to freedom, like her time spent on the Underground Railroad, and how could I help create empathy by using the child to illustrate what that might have felt like and how scary that could have been. That child, I think it was just as scary for adults and just as scary for Harriet the first time she left Cambridge. And so that the ability to use the two figures to kind of help bring people to that headspace. I mean, that's, and then just touching on the historical details of the piece, trying to give a nod to different aspects of her life that didn't actually tie to that one historical moment in time. And those are like the jacket was sort of based on something she might have worn when she went down to South Carolina to help the Union Army and rescue all of those slaves on those plantations, which was almost 900 people. So the coat was part of that. The satchel was sort of part of that dialogue. And there's many more layers of historical details built into that, including her age. Like she actually, at the time she was doing her raids back and forth to Cambridge, she would not look as she does in the Journey to Freedom. She was younger, and it was intentional because I wanted to embody her whole life, the accomplishments of her whole life, not just that moment in time. So there was some artistic license that I took, and maybe it worked.
No, it did. It did. It resonates, everything, you know. Did you say, what'd you say, Hank?
I said, thank you. I didn't hear, could you expand on the story about that specific journey that you mentioned? I haven't heard that one.
So this was, and even like when you dig into how many trips she made back to Cambridge, like when she went into Cambridge. So the Journey to Freedom, when we started talking about it, there was a little girl, Gertie, who she ended up adopting, and she brought that child to Auburn. And there's lots of speculation about who that little girl was and how she was connected to Harriet. But Harriet did adopt her. She lived with her in Auburn. So that was sort of the focus of the story, but it really was about, I mean, the child was supposed to be a much larger metaphor for everyone. The adults that she was going to help, that sometimes were older than her, you know, were just as terrified as anyone else. And so the child was a convenient way to try and build empathy that connected with everyone, man, woman, old, young. But yeah, there is a very specific story. And if you look up her daughter, her adopted daughter, that's where it came from.
Great. Thank you, Wesley, for sharing that. You know, we discussed earlier, there's so many different definitions of public art. And you know, some people associate public art with, you know, statues, monuments, you know, only. Ife and Talia, both of you have done public art projects in Philadelphia that teach people about history beyond the typical statue or monument. Can you provide some examples of your work? We'll start with Ife.
Sure. I've worked on several projects in Philadelphia. I didn't start working in public art arena until 2010. And I really didn't even know that this was a direction for me, because I worked many years as a graphic designer. But I've always been committed to community and community voices. And one of the first pieces, which is not a statue, was the President's House, which was really a very contentious, discussion in the community about the 9 enslaved Africans that they found, evidence of, that were at the George Washington's house when they did the archaeological discovery to rebuild this memorial. And then that piece, I was really, it was different because it was, more of a structure, and I wanted it to be more of a contemplative piece where people could, there was a story of Philadelphia and story of the Africans that belonged to Washington. But then I also wanted people to know the story of our ancestors, that Africans came, bringing with them skills, and they had languages and they had culture. So that piece also showed a call and response, and it was more of a graphic, symbolism on the structure that was supposed to be a contemplative space. I've also worked on a project called Elephants in the Avenue, which is about race, class in Philadelphia and Germantown area. And then that particular piece, I did what they called tunnel book workshops, artists creating these tunnel books, which is a historical form of art. And I brought that piece in and asked the community to reconstruct their own stories, and people brought their own histories. We had dialogues. It was also I was paired with a historian and artist, and there were 5 of us artists that were in Germantown area that were working with the historical Germantown community, and also with Historic Germantown, which was an organization that had all the historical houses in the area where I live. There's like, many historical houses that were now trying to redefine their place in the communities that they were in had changed. And now they were trying to see how they could change the narrative, tell a more inclusive narrative, and tell the story in a way that would bring that people in the community could identify with. So that piece was also a very interesting piece because it was tons of community engagement. It was a lot of community activity and workshops. I just created 2 workshops that were engaging people. And the other pieces I did, which I talk, is Reid, which is a mural that you see. And Reid is just basically was a community portrait for the Logan Library. And I was commissioned to do this. It took about 2 years, and most of the projects took about 2 or 3 years that I've been working on. And this particular one was incorporating the poem and poetry, and it speaks to writing scripts are in it. And I say Reid in Arabic and Amharic, because those were the people in the community. It was an immigrant community in Philadelphia, where there are people from the Caribbean, from Africa, from Ethiopia, from Asia, from Cambodia. So I also had the language Reid in Khmer, in Amharic, and Arabic, because there were a lot of Muslims also in this community. And I wanted to just inspire their children to the stories of reading. And so you'll see writings of different authors, of people that they should know about who come from immigrant communities, and the poetry of Trapita Mason, who also had lived in that community. And I used her poem Reid to really transform the children. And these panels were paintings that were digitally printed on acoustical panels in the common room, and so that the children could have activities. So it played as a backdrop to the community. And the other one, the last one you see, is Ogun and the People, where I was engaged again in I went to Cuba for a 10-day, or I guess a 9-day immersion, cultural immersion with Kulumele, who was their 50th year celebration. And they had a grant from the Pew Heritage Foundation, and they took the whole troop to learn this ancient Cuban Yoruba Pataki called Ogun and the People. And it was a beautiful story, a history of Yoruba culture, the culture of the diaspora. And we brought the story. I went with Dottie Wilkie and the Kulumele Ensemble, and we learned so much about how the African culture was so strong there. And it was just amazing to me to see our group emerge ourselves there and then bring it back, because also there's and they're part of the Yoruba community here. So it's a part of a memory that we have as a people. And I just created backdrops, and I created a drape using African fabrics, and that is what you see there are the people dancing, and also they're enacting out the drama of Ogun and the People. And he is basically, it's a story of, him coming, the people rejected him, and then each of the Orishas come and with love, they each try with their skills to try to bring him out. And it's only through love that he's brought out by Oshun to come and bring it back to the people, the technologies and the things that they lost. So it's a beautiful story of being lost and found. And it was brought back to the community. It was done at Annenberg, but it was also in different smaller local community centers that we also had workshops. So to me, this was a public art. It was also an installation as well. And it was temporary, but it was a way of engaging community in memory, and also learning memory, and a dialogue and discussion about who we are and where we're going and how we inspire our young people and the youth.
Yeah, your work is beautiful, Ife, and I just love how even just in this one slide of just a sampling of your work shows the great vast variety of things that you've been doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Talia, do you like to share some your work that's beyond the typical statue or monument? Oh, Talia, you're on mute, I think.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I think so. I think I said this. I do have a fine art background, and I don't think of myself necessarily as a public artist, but over time, I think it has become much more about public art, because most of the time I'm showing work, it's outside of the sort of museum and gallery system. So sometimes it's in, historic homes, or, other non-art venues. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how to communicate ideas and what the role of art is, and how I can use art to, tell stories that aren't told, or recontextualize spaces. So, so this piece in particular was a Present for Art project, and so that is officially in a public art project, and it's also permanent. So it's at the Philadelphia City Archives, which was just an incredible opportunity to find a way to tell some of the stories and that are, I guess, represented by documents in the archives. So that was the goal, and the piece uses documents from the archives, specifically maps, but other documents as well that are related to resistance to slavery and resistance to housing discrimination. So the piece is an interactive mural, and it's in the reading room of the archives and also in the foyer. So for I guess the smallest image that's to the left of my name, that's all the way at the back of the space, and that's the beginning of the mural. So as visitors walk across the mural, you're basically moving forward in time and learning about the history of resistance in Philadelphia through documents that are in the city archives. And you can see that the image to the left of that one, the one that's above me, shows a phone. So we created an interactive augmented reality app that would enable visitors to scan the documents and learn more about the stories and people behind the documents. The huge part of the process was really less in a way about making the art and more about thinking about the best way to communicate these stories to the public and who our audience was, and what we wanted them to experience and take from it. And I guess I should say that the main document that is used throughout the piece is a pretty rare redlining map from Philadelphia that was actually donated very close to the time when I got the commission, or actually before I got the commission, I guess. And so in the image that's right below my name, you can see a redlining map that has parts of the map cut out. And so as you move across the mural, parts of the redlining map are cut out to reveal the document that is then scanned and provides stories. So that's sort of an overview of the piece. And
that's great. No, thank you. Thank you, Talia. Beautiful work. Well, Marsha, you are curating the Monumental Tour, right? Traveling public art exhibit that was recently in Philadelphia. And Hank, one of your pieces, All Power to All People, has been part of the tour. For both of you, I'm curious, in your experiences with traveling public art installations, were there any ways that the public has responded that surprised you? And were there differences in how maybe Philadelphia responded versus other cities? I'll let Marsha start. She's pointing at you, Hank, but I'll let Marsha start if whoever's willing.
I can speak to Philadelphia. I'm going to let Hank speak to the public. Okay. So I was saying this to Wesley earlier, that much of my work, after being entrusted with these monumental, magnificent pieces of work by these talented artists, much of my work is negotiating the right to be in public space. And to hold space is a powerful thing, which makes it inherently political. And so if you don't, any space, any one of those spaces that you can see in the images is tied up by a host of agencies who all have to be navigated in order for us to be experienced or seen in public. And when I say us, I'm speaking about POC cultural expression in general, not just my experience, just anything other than that is that which has already been there, has to navigate. And so the difference in working with Philadelphia than working in other cities is, in this instance, Kindred initially made outreach to Philadelphia in the summer of 2020, which was an election year, and peak pandemic and the height of the Black Lives Matter uprisings, the largest civil uprisings that America has seen. And I think I read that there's about 15 million to 26 million people in the United States that participated in those uprisings and demonstrations. I felt the necessity to also participate. It felt irresponsible to have these symbols of Black empowerment and not be out on the road, right? So we made a push in Philadelphia that actually the city wasn't able to hold at the time. So when I say the city, I mean all of those agencies that grant permission for you to be in public space couldn't function at that moment. Everything was closed. And so Philadelphia, as a public, when they learned that we wanted to be there, insisted upon it and opened their private spaces to us and championed and funded the pieces specifically, two pieces. Hank's piece, All Power to All People, and Kehinde Wiley's Rumors of War. And then a really interesting thing happened. When we'd moved on from Philadelphia, and the world kind of was getting back to some sense of normalcy, although I say that inwardly, we're not really all back to normal yet. The city of Philadelphia circled all the way back around and asked us to come back because they were now functioning, and they really felt it was really important for us to realize the exhibition in its fullness, and they wanted to support it. And I say that's strange because that's not how government typically works. And they bent over backwards to our third time around, give us prime placement along the Benjamin Franklin Parkway. And it speaks to the values of the Arts and Cultural Department and the Parks and Rec organizations that hold those spaces and manage those spaces. And yeah, it was unique to Philadelphia, and it won't be forgotten. You know, none of the work that we do, placing these important symbols of empowerment none of it happens without bold co-presenters and courageous co-presenters. And so for me, working with Philadelphia was very special that way. I'll let Hank speak to the public responses.
Oh, looks like Hank might have frozen.
Well,
Oh, can't hear.
um,
Hear you.
for me,
Yeah, there you go.
first, hello?
Yeah.
For me, in Philadelphia,
Hey, Hank, you're breaking up a little
connection to
bit.
rich history in the city of Philadelphia.
Why don't we try this? Why don't you
Oh,
just
no.
try for a
Can you hear me?
second, turning off your camera just for a second, and maybe that will help.
Is
Let's
that
see if that
better?
works.
Is this better?
We can't hear you. Yes.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
You can't hear me.
We can hear you. Yes.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, so being in Philadelphia for me is meaningful for a lot of reasons. Most of all, the fact that my grandmother, who lived in Philadelphia her entire life, turned 100 years old just last week.
Oh, wow.
And the connection to Philadelphia has been literally part of my entire life. And I first was introduced to public art in Philadelphia, as I mentioned earlier. And when I collaborated with Monument Lab in 2016 or 2016, to put a smaller version of the Afropic at Police Plaza, Hope Kennedy's piece is featured here in this photograph. It was a kind of watershed moment for me in my career. There it is, in that recognizing, as many might recall, this is where away from where the Frank Rizzo statue was placed, which was controversial. And the Monument Lab, working with the city and mural arts to put my sculpture in proximity to that sculpture, was in some ways influential in the ultimate removing of that sculpture after, of course, the uprising of 2020. But for me, I felt that there was like a flag put in the sand by introducing an alternative to that
Hank, I think we're losing you.
Oh.
that was really eye-opening for me. You can't hear me? Hello?
Keep going.
Hello?
You're sounding okay now.
Hello?
We can hear you now, but we were losing you for a little bit. Why don't you try again?
It's so strange. And I try to get onto my computer, but I don't know if anyone saw that. Sorry about this. It's technological.
That's fine.
So I was saying that, that coming back version of the Afropic sculpture was pretty triumphant. It was exciting to place it first with the Monument Tour in the yard of the church, North Penn Baptist Church, where my grandmother has been a member for 80 plus years. But also it was exciting in the subsequent years to put my sculptures up as a neon in downtown San Francisco. in honor of my cousin Sunga Willis, who was murdered in Philadelphia, but whose last words that I found that were recorded were "love overrules." So, and then even the sculpture at the bottom left corner, which is in Brooklyn, it's of a 22-foot bronze arm pointing to the sky, is it is a result of a 3D scan of the arm of Joel Embiid, who is the center for the All-Star Center for the Philadelphia 76ers. So in some way or another, Philly is in everything I make, no matter where it is. And I'm really, I'm hoping we can find a way to do more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Hank. And,
Mhm.
The tour was wonderful, and I'm excited to see that it's moved on. It's in Los Angeles now, right, Marsha? Okay, well, I have a couple more. I have actually have a ton more questions for all of you, but I also want to be cognizant of our time, and I know we have a great audience here. So I'd like to pause, and open the floor to questions from our audience. To ask a question, if you have any question for our panelists, please use the raise your hand feature located at the bottom menu of your Zoom window. When you're called on, you will be unmuted to ask your question. And if you prefer not asking out loud, you prefer to write it, you can type it. You can type your question in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. So I want to ask our co-host, Stephanie, if we have any questions.
Yes. So first, Hank, if you can turn on your video, we still at least want to see you.
Yes, turn it back on
in the panelist bar.
Yeah.
And then the first person, Charles Ramat Woods, you can unmute yourself and feel free to ask your question.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Peace be with you. What a wonderful, wonderful program. My question is about the reproduction of your great public works. The city of Rochester, New York did a interesting thing with a Frederick Douglass statue that was from 1899, and they had a artist, Olivia Kim, who along with filmmaker Carvin Eisen, produce epoxy resin copies of the original statue and place them all around the community of Rochester, New York, including the airport. And they've even placed some down here in the Washington, D.C. area where I am. So my question is, with these great works of art, and in terms of being public, in terms of pushing them into the community, is reproducing them an option that you all consider? Ife.
Well, I don't really know about Philadelphia. I know we have a mural. We have a really strong, reputation for beautiful murals. And those are the things that I've seen that really are in our communities, as far as art structures that are permanent, that would be in the community. I know that people have been doing billboards. Artists have been designing billboards in the community. So Philadelphia has been doing some really interesting, innovative things on reproducing how you reproduce art for the public, So I think that I haven't seen anything. Maybe the other artists could speak to sculptures being reproduced and set in a community, but I know that we do have a strong presence in the community with the murals that we have here.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie, do we have a lot more questions, or do we have time for another?
Yeah, we have another question. I just didn't know if any other of the panelists.
Yeah, I was gonna see if someone else wanted to respond to that, but wanted to get a sense.
Hey,
Someone, maybe Hank or Wesley, would you like to respond to the statue portion?
Hey, Ru. Hello?
Hank, yes, we can hear you. Okay, I think he's on mute. Wesley, do
No,
you have?
yeah, I'd say I was trying to see if I can get this computer working, but it's
Oh,
not.
no worries. It's okay. Sorry, I'm sorry.
If anyone else wants to respond, if not, we can go to our next question, which came in through the chat.
I could touch on it for a second. Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
mean, with figurative art specifically, yes, reproductions are possible, and it kind of varies from commission to commission as far as who owns those reproduction rights. Are there limitations to like for the Journey to Freedom specifically, like I retained the copyright and I shared it with my client, but we cannot, we're bound contractually to not be able to reproduce it. So this is an artist print that is traveling around. But ordinarily artists retain the reproduction rights, and usually it's kind of a negotiation every instance regarding public spaces, like how are those reproductions going to be handled? You know, what is the responsibility of the artist, and what is the how do they work with the city or the commissioning agent to make it an equitable sort of a conversation. So it's an ongoing dialogue for a sculptor, for sure.
Sure, for sure. So it looks like we have just a few more minutes left. I think if we can get a couple more questions in, that'd be great.
Yeah, so the second question that came in through the chat was, what are your thoughts on the role government should play in presenting public art that's relevant to contemporary issues to help our communities heal?
I'd love to hear maybe Marsha, if you have some thoughts.
I think an important role that government can play is to reduce the bureaucracy that's involved in allowing individuals to exist in public space. Beyond that, I don't know that there's much use for government, since, I mean, I don't want to say church and state, but I think that my experience tells me that my interactions with government have all been about permissions. So yeah, I think that should be their role in unred taping some of those spaces. You know, the bureaucratic burden, the administrative burden for the average person to even pitch a table and present things that they've made with their hands and that they would love to share with the world is beyond the time and the access and information required is ridiculous. So I think that would be an important role that government could play.
I
Thank you,
agree
Marsha.
with Marsha. I mean, I think that when you look at public art, just my experience in public art is just there are a lot of barriers for more diversity of artists to be able to even engage in creating a public art, piece. And it takes sometimes, through, contracting, like you say, and having the funds sometimes to be able to upfront the production and the fabrication of it, it's a lot. So I think that, government could have some kind of funds more, available to artists to be able to, create the art.
Now, these are all good, all great answers, all great thoughts.
There's another
one
hand
more.
raised. Charles had a second question. Feel free to ask.
Well, I didn't. I forgot to lower my hand, right?
Oh.
but thank you so much, though. It's a wonderful program. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Okay, well, that is going to conclude our program tonight. I want to thank you, our audience.
Oh wait, it looks like we had, sorry, there's a hand raised.
Is there one? Okay.
Is that Kelly?
It is me.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi. Well, two things. One, I wanted to thank the panelists for a great conversation. And secondly, I really appreciate the comments, Marsha and Ife, about how government can try to get out of the way and allow more public art, more creative expression in our public spaces. And that's one of the things that, our office is trying to work within the system in order to help to sort of facilitate those things. But in the meantime, what we are trying to do, and hopefully we are successful, is helping our artists to navigate that bureaucratic process. And the other thing that I wanted to add, because we were talking a little bit about sort of replicating some of these amazing pieces in different communities, is that on one hand, a lot of your work is sometimes site specific, and is sort of unique to a particular space. But one of the things that we will be announcing hopefully next year is a new program to work with artists to mostly build capacity for public artists to do temporary works in their communities and neighborhoods. So this will allow for more community engagement and more of these great works within our neighborhood. So, the comments that were said were spot on. So I just wanted to thank you and, appreciate like all that you have contributed to this city and also participating in this panel.
Yeah.
We have one more question that came in I would like for us to be able to answer. So if we could graciously go over a few minutes.
Absolutely.
The question is, I wonder if you had all the money you needed and got all the permissions, what piece of art would you dream to provide publicly?
Wow.
That's a great one. Who wants to jump on that one?
I have to think about it.
There wouldn't be one. Sorry, I'm gonna contribute to that. If I had all the money and all the permissions, I would gather all of the artists and think about how we might considerately use space and understand that everyone doesn't have to be everywhere for 100 years or even 200 years. That perhaps we rotate and we consider the huge diversity that we are, and we figure out how to share space. We come up with an organization or a way to equitably represent and affirm our constituents and citizens in all of the spaces. But that's all of the money and all of the permissions.
Anyone else?
Well, I would, like to see, it would be good to see art, everywhere, with different expressions. And, if you had all the money, I don't think I would just want sculptures. I would want to see different types of art, which we see, but more of it in a way that speaks to the community. I think that the people in the communities would help to define and work with the artists to see what it is that they would want to remember or what they would want to see. I guess I would approach it that way if it's public art. If it's my own art, I would have, probably a different approach to it. But it would be good to see what the people would want to create. And people are doing some really amazing things now, but they just don't have all the money to do it.
I think
One last one. Yeah, go ahead, Wesley.
in the figurative art realm, I think I would take that Monument Labs list of figurative statues in the United States, and I would fill out the rest of that story. That list. I mean, Harriet Tubman is like number 28. I mean, there's a decent amount of statues of her around the country, but like she's just one person of color. Like I think there's so many other people that has so many other sides to the coin and so many other stories to tell. I think Harriet is kind of the low-hanging fruit or the obvious one because of her renown, but there's so many other stories of people of color, of Native Americans, and other represented groups that aren't in our public spaces. I would like to tell that story nationwide, all over the place. There's amazing stories everywhere of other contributors that have never had a voice. I think that would do a lot of, I think that would change a lot of things as far as how people felt about each other. I think that there's a unification there that could really be valuable.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Those are, oh, go ahead, Marsha. What are you gonna say?
So the list that Wesley's referring to is the Monuments Lab study that examined about 50,000 US monuments to determine what the demographics of the national commemorative landscape was. And it said that of the 50 individuals represented most frequently by monuments in this country, 88% are white men and half were slave owners. And only 6% of the statues represent women and 10% honor Black or Indigenous figures. And the study was done by Monument Lab to aid the initiative to rethink who Americans honor, why, and how. And I think that's our collective work here. And I think the City of Philadelphia is doing an amazing job in enabling that conversation. And I'm very grateful to them for hosting us and for inviting me to speak on the panel.
That's a great note to end on, Marsha. If we don't have any other questions, I also want to thank Kelly Lee, our Chief Cultural Officer, who said some great words there. Are there any other questions, Stephanie?
No, there were not.
Okay, all right. This has been just an amazing evening and a really great time talking with all of you and having our audience join us. That is going to conclude our program tonight. I really want to thank our panelists for sharing your inspiring public art experiences and stories with us tonight. I think we really are, we've been enlightened. So please check creativephl.org for the remaining schedule of Harriet Tubman events. There are a number of programs still remaining in many ways to engage. And if you are local to Philadelphia, please join us in person on March the 10th for the city celebration of Harriet Tubman's 200th birthday at City Hall. During the event, there will be a special public art announcement that you won't want to miss. So I'm just leave it at that. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a
Thanks.
fantastic conversation.
Thank you.